I almost didn't make it out alive. True scary story. The Appalachians always felt like a different country. A place where the trees grew too thick, the roads narrowed to whispers, and the air hung heavy with secrets. Dr. Albright had practically vibrated with excitement when he described the abandoned Blackwood mine. A geological anomaly, Sarah unlike anything I've ever seen. He'd rambled on about rare mineral deposits and potential research papers. But for me, it was the sheer isolation that drew me in. A chance to test myself, to prove I could handle fieldwork alone. Daniel, bless his heart, was less enthusiastic. Just be careful, okay? Call me every day, even if it's just to say you're still alive. His worry was a comfort, a reminder of the world I was temporarily leaving behind. The drive was brutal. The last 10 miles were a rutted dirt track barely passable in my Jeep. I passed a construction crew widening the road, their faces grim and coated in dust. The foreman, a wiry man with eyes that seemed to have seen too much, just shook his head when I asked about the mine. Blackwood, place is cursed. Lot of bad things happened there. People went in, didn't come out. I dismissed it as local superstition. The mine entrance was a gaping maw in the hillside, choked with weeds and rusted machinery. A faded sign warned of trespassing, but the words were barely legible. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely unsettling. I set up my base camp in a small clearing a safe distance from the entrance. The first few days were uneventful. I mapped the main tunnels, collected samples, and meticulously documented my findings. The geology was indeed unusual, with veins of quartz and pyrite twisting through the coal seams in bizarre patterns. I called Daniel every evening, his voice a lifeline across the miles, reassuring me that life outside the mine was still normal. But then things started to shift. The battery in my headlamp would flicker for no reason, casting erratic shadows that danced on the damp walls. The silence, which had initially been so peaceful, began to feel oppressive, punctuated by echoes that sounded like whispers just beyond the reach of my hearing. One day, deeper in the mine than I had ever ventured before, I found it. A section of the mine that wasn't on any of the old maps I had. The air in this area was noticeably colder, and a strange, almost metallic tang hung in the air. The rock walls were covered in bizarre symbols, etched deep into the stone. They weren't mining marks or geological formations. They looked intentional. My radio started acting up. Static filled the air, obliterating Daniel's voice. I tried to adjust the frequency, but nothing worked. Panic began to creep in, a cold tendril wrapping around my heart. The sounds intensified. I started hearing scraping noises, like something dragging itself along the walls. Footsteps echoed in the distance, always just out of sight. I kept telling myself it was just the settling of the mine, the wind whistling through the tunnels. But the rational explanations felt increasingly hollow. Then came the nightmares. Vivid, terrifying visions of being trapped in the mine, pursued by something unseen. I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced I could still hear the whispers in the darkness. I tried to call Dr. Albright, but the radio was useless. I considered packing up and leaving, but the thought of abandoning my research, of admitting defeat, was unbearable. It was on the 7th day that I saw him. Old Man Hemlock. He just appeared out of nowhere as I was collecting water from a nearby stream. He was a gaunt figure, his face a road map of wrinkles, his eyes like chips of obsidian. "You shouldn't be in that mine, girl," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "That place ain't right. Things sleep there, things that should be left alone." I tried to reason with him, to explain my research, but he just shook his head. "They don't like being disturbed. They don't like the light. You go digging around in their home, they'll come for you." He vanished as quickly as he appeared, leaving me shaken and unnerved. That night, the mine felt different. The whispers were louder, closer. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist in the periphery of my vision. I tried to sleep, but every creak and groan of the mine sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the tunnels. The ground shook violently and dust rained down from the ceiling. A section of the tunnel behind me collapsed, sealing off my escape route. I was trapped. Panic seized me, a suffocating wave of terror. I scrambled over the rubble, desperate to find another way out, but it was no use. The collapse was complete. Injured and disoriented, I stumbled deeper into the mine, hoping to find another passage. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe. My headlamp flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced around me like mocking spirits. And then I saw it, or rather I felt it. A presence cold and malevolent lurking just beyond the reach of my senses. The air grew heavy, making it hard to breathe. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single chilling voice that seemed to echo inside my head. Get out. I ran, driven by pure, unadulterated terror. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. The mind seemed to twist and turn, the tunnels becoming narrower, more claustrophobic. The walls seemed to close in on me, pressing down, suffocating me. I heard something behind me, a dragging, scraping sound that grew louder with each passing second. I didn't dare look back. I stumbled upon a narrow passage, barely wide enough to crawl through. Desperate, I squeezed inside, pushing myself forward inch by inch. The passage was damp and cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The rock walls scraped against my skin, tearing at my clothes. The whispers followed me, taunting me, driving me closer to the edge of madness. I imagined I could feel the presence behind me, its breath cold on my neck. Time lost all meaning. I crawled on, driven by instinct alone. My body ached, my lungs burned, my mind teetered on the brink of collapse. I started hallucinating. I saw Daniel's face in the darkness, his eyes filled with concern. I heard Dr. Albright's voice urging me to continue my research. The symbols from the walls of the mine danced before my eyes, morphing into grotesque faces. Then a glimmer of light, a tiny pinprick in the darkness, growing larger with each agonizing inch. Hope surged through me, a jolt of adrenaline that pushed me forward. I scrambled towards the light, clawing at the loose earth, ignoring the pain in my body. Finally, I broke through. I tumbled out of the passage and onto the forest floor, gasping for air. The world spun around me, a kaleidoscope of green and blue. I was out. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, too weak to move. The sun beat down on me, warming my skin. The sounds of the forest filled my ears, a symphony of life that drowned out the whispers in my head. Eventually, I managed to stand. I stumbled towards the road, my body screaming in protest. I flagged down a passing pickup truck. The driver, a burly man with a skeptical expression, stared at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. He took me to the nearest town, a sleepy hamlet nestled in the foothills of the Appalachians. Sheriff Brody, a weary-looking man with a salt and pepper mustache, listened to my story with a raised eyebrow. He searched the mine but found nothing. No signs of a collapse, no strange symbols, no evidence of anything unusual. He suggested I might have been suffering from dehydration and exhaustion. Dr. Albright arrived the next day, his face etched with concern. He examined my samples but dismissed them as ordinary geological formations. He suggested I take some time off, maybe see a therapist. Daniel held me close, his touch a reassuring anchor in the sea of doubt. He didn't question my story, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Back home, I tried to put the mine behind me, but the whispers still haunted my dreams. The shadows still danced in the periphery of my vision. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced that something was still watching me. One night, I woke up to a strange scratching sound coming from my apartment. I got out of bed and followed the sound to the living room. There, on the floor, was a rock I had unknowingly brought back from the mine. It was pulsing faintly with a cold, blue light. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "We're not finished with you. I don't know what I saw in the Blackwood mine. I don't know if it was real or just a figment of my imagination. But I do know that something changed me in that darkness. Something that will never let me go. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I ever truly left the mine at all. Maybe it just came home with me."